Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Matt Dorsey, Chief Scientific Officer and Formulator for Chalk. And I've got a really interesting message today. I wrote a blog article a little while back that I'd like to read part of to you, or perhaps the entire thing. Howdy, everybody. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here. Special Sunday edition of Dr. Matt and IG Live. But anyway, yeah, so those of you who are joining right now, I wrote a blog article called Don't Be a Biohacker Because You Are Not a Machine a while back. And it's a topic I think a lot of you are near and dear to. And by the way, I'll be answering questions in just a little bit, but hang on for just 1 minute. So the theme of today is you are not a machine, right? I believe that probably a lot of you guys know that there is a scientific materialist type of mindset or philosophy that tends to project machine-like qualities onto us and onto other living organisms. And it's a bit dangerous. It's not a particularly helpful ethos. So again, I wrote this article called Don't Be a Biohacker Because You're Not a Machine. I'm wearing these on purpose today because these are associated with biohacking, but they also do have a calming effect, and they're nice and good for chilling out the nervous system. So I'm going to read part of this blog article to you guys. Without further ado, here we go. You are not a machine. You are a living organism with purpose and feeling and irrational fuzziness. You are autopoietic, meaning that you renew and regenerate yourself. You are sovereign in your subjectivity, an ecosystem unto yourself who's dynamically, intrinsically interconnected with the universal macrocosm of life and mind. Who and what you are can never be reduced to the collisions of subatomic particles and forces that govern them, because at scale, you transcend the boundaries and knowledge of physics as we know it. But here's the question. Why do we even need to be reminded that we're not machines in the first place? Indeed, it is a sign of the times, right? So, why do you want to not be a biohacker, right? Sure, biohacking's fine. Like, it's cool. We got the, cool glasses. You got supplements. That's part of biohacking. You got your massage gun, maybe. We've got biofeedback, auditory and visual biofeedback and meditation, all that. That's cool. That's great, right? Like all these things, right? But why do we use the term biohacking? Where does that come from? Here's what I have to say about it. Biohacking, or the process of using scientific experimentation and technology to optimize your biology, can be a beautiful thing when used consciously. But the term itself smacks of a broken paradigm, a philosophically impoverished worldview called scientific materialism that was born out of the 17th-century belief that nature is a collection of mechanical objects rather than an integrated dynamic living system. Hackers control and dominate the computers they gain access to. They look for exploits and use their technical prowess to bend systems to their will. Does that sound like manipulation to you? Humans have been doing the same thing to nature for far too long, and it's ruining the planet as well as our relationships with our bodies, the living systems that are our bodies. In this article, I'm asking a simple question. Is biohacking really an appropriate term for supporting and improving living systems? So, I'm not anti-technology. I'm not a Luddite. I love technology, but we have taken this too far. So, there's an article called How Language Shapes the Brain, where I quote a definition of a Japanese word called kotodama. And this has to do with the importance of using language. Kotodama, word spirit, is the idea that words have an almost magical power to alter physical reality. Through its pervasive impact on society, including its influence on superstitions and social etiquette, traditional poetry, and modern pop songs, the word kotodama has in a way provided proof of its own concept. For centuries, many cultures have believed in the spiritual force of language. I think you guys probably get that, right? Over time, these ideas have extended from the realm of magic and mythology to become a topic of scientific investigation, ultimately leading to the discovery that language can indeed affect the physical world, even alter our physiology. Words are very, very much real, right? So let's take a trip back really fast to the Renaissance, right? The birthplace of science as we know it, and see where this whole machine metaphor came from in the first place. This section of this is hilariously titled, this section of the article is called Biohacking Your Dog, Nature as Machine. In his book Science Set Free, biologist Rupert Sheldrake outlines the way that philosophers and scientists in the 1600s began to shift humanity's conception of nature away from the vitalistic traditions and more naturalistic traditions into a new metaphor of nature as being mechanical in nature, as opposed to alive. In vitalism, all living organisms are thought to possess something akin to a soul and are endowed with life force energy. This was taken for granted until Europeans like Kepler, Galileo, and Descartes began to use machine metaphors to refer to nature. Sheldrake, in his book, describes Kepler's thoughts in the following passage. In 1605, Johannes Kepler summarized his program as follows: "My aim is to show that the celestial machine is to be likened not to a divine organism, but rather to clockwork." Being an astronomer, Kepler only applied this machine metaphor to the movements of the heavens, but Descartes, in fact, took it one step further, and he applied this machine metaphor to the entirety of nature. Descartes took the mechanical metaphor much further than Kepler or Galileo by extending it into the realm of life. He was fascinated by the sophisticated machinery of his age, such as clocks, looms, and pumps. Just as Kepler projected the image of man-made machinery onto the cosmos, Descartes projected it onto animals. They too were like clockwork. Now here's the part that's going to probably weird some of you guys out. This part's a little freaky. It's very much not cool. So if you think Descartes was a good guy, allow me to shatter that perception of him. Descartes' belief in this mechanistic concept of nature was so unassailable, he was fully confident that doing unspeakable things to animals was no big deal, operating under the assumption that they were essentially machines and had no feelings. Operate he did. Descartes was a biohacker in the most brutal, literal sense of the word, as he was known to cut up living dogs without anesthesia just for the sake of studying their anatomy. Sheldrake goes on to say, Descartes' doctrine seems to justify cruelty to animals, including vivisection, and it was said that the test of his followers was whether or not they would kick their dogs. They seriously believed that animals had no feelings and were like machines, and that it was okay to harm them. So there you have it, the birth of dog-kicking scientific materialism. So, infatuated with their own mechanical creations, humans, in an attempt to see themselves as more like God, decided that God made machines too, and projected machine-like qualities onto living systems in order to suit their delusions of grandeur, blissfully ignoring the glaring differences between machines and life forms, such as self-determination, growth, regeneration, consciousness, and sovereignty. A topic that's particularly important right now. Sovereignty. Increasingly, there's actually a term for this error in perception. It's called mechanomorphism. So the term mechanomorphism means projecting machine-like qualities onto living systems, right? So maybe some of y'all know the term anthropomorphism, right? Which is projecting human-like qualities onto something. So if you project a human-like quality onto a robot, and you think that that robot is human, that would be anthropomorphism, right? Anthropomorphism. But if you project machine-like qualities onto a living system, then that is mechanomorphism, right? And that's what's being done to us, by us. We are projecting machine-like qualities onto humans, treating each other increasingly like machines, and treating ourselves like machines. And I would argue that the word biohacking suggests that we are machines when we are in fact not, and that it is not the best term to use. Just as anthropomorphism is the projection of human characteristics onto things that are not human, mechanomorphism is, like I said, projecting machine-like properties onto organisms. So much of the language we use is just like this, like biohacking, right? In the hypersynthetic human-fabricated milieu of the early 21st century, in which we're ensconced in an ever-glowing, ever-beeping nest of electronic devices, safe from the unpredictability and messiness of Gaia and all her chaotic vicissitudes, mechanomorphism has been fully normalized. This is the sea of artificial insanity we're swimming in so many ways. The vast majority of the time, we're surrounded by things made by humans, objects with impossibly perfect right angles, right? Bearing precision machine stainless steel parts that are easily replaced with finishes that resist degradation from even the hungriest of nature's flora. Those microbes gifted with the biochemical ferocity to break down and recycle nearly everything, until humans showed up, of course. So think back to the last few weeks. When was the last time that you heard a machine-based metaphor used to describe a living organism, right? So did you fuel up, for example, to prepare for the day? Has someone ever told you that they could see the gears turning in your head? Have you ever felt pride when someone told you that your team was working like a well-oiled machine? Now, these seem like totally harmless metaphors, of course. Like, whatever is most prominent in our environment will be a convenient substrate for our metaphor making, right? And our environment is filled with machines. So it's only natural that we would use machine metaphors to describe ourselves and other living organisms. Seen at face value, using these machine metaphors like biohacking to refer to living systems may seem thoroughly benign, but language profoundly impacts the way that we think, feel, behave, everything. Remember, koto dhamma, language has a spirit. In the book, Words Can Change Your Brain, the authors state that a single word has the power to influence the expression of genes that regulate physical and emotional stress. Language affects us much more deeply than we care to admit. Here's a story from the famous linguist Alfred Korzybski. One day, Korzybski was giving a lecture to a group of students, and he interrupted the lesson suddenly in order to retrieve a packet of biscuits wrapped in white paper from his briefcase. He asked the students on the seats in front row if they would also like a biscuit. A few students took a biscuit. "Nice biscuit, don't you think?" said Korzybski, while he took a second one. The students were chewing vigorously. Then he tore the white paper from the biscuits in order to reveal the original packaging. On it was a big picture of a dog's head and had the words "dog cookies" on the front. The students looked at the package and were shocked. Two of them wanted to vomit, put their hands in front of their mouths, and ran out of the lecture hall to the toilet. "You see," Korzybski replied, "I have just demonstrated that people don't just eat food, they also eat words, and that the taste of the former is often outdone by the taste of the latter. Language is psychoactive. Language is edible. Words are spells. And so how we talk about something is everything." So again, do we really want to be biohackers? I think that you guys know the importance of language, and some people would say it's just a term, it's not a big deal. But I really do think that the word biohacking points to a much deeper problem in our society. This idea that everything is machine-like. Humans have gotten so good at building machines, right? We've got so good at using our scientific prowess to develop this artificial world that we have gotten lost in our own creation, and the new religion is sort of the religion of scientific materialism that is taking over, right? That obviously that religion can be used in ways that aren't so great, hint, hint. So, a slippery slope. There's an unconscious tendency for humans to lose themselves in their infatuation with their own scientific and technological breakthroughs and hubristically assume that they're smarter than nature. Sound familiar, right? Ever seen that happen? In other words, we can get so caught up in admiring our tools and techniques that we fail to recognize just how little we still know about how Gaia walks and talks. These huge mysteries, right? We can get overconfident regarding our ability to safely and effectively improve upon her designs. We're going to make nature better. We're going to improve it. We're going to insert this gene here, right? Just make little tweaks to the design of nature, right? Toy around. The belief system we've unwittingly inherited from several hundred years ago has led us to deny certain aspects of nature which cannot yet be measured, such as consciousness, life force, and other fuzzy ideas that ancient people have come up with due to their deep connection with her. In that same vein, here's a beautiful quote from biologist and futurist Elizabeth Sahtouris. "If science did not deny consciousness and intelligence in nature, things would look very different. We could no longer see nature as an array of resources for human use. We humans would not be in full control of our technological solutions to problems, and our technological solutions to problems would often come into question. People are turning in droves to traditional forms of growing food and healing by hands-on bodywork, shamanic healings, and herbal remedies that often come from indigenous people's knowledge. All these forms of healing respect the intelligence of the body to heal itself with minor assistance from natural sources rather than dramatic technological interventions." So biohacking can take many forms, from relatively benign practices of things like supplements, anything to improve your sleep, minimizing blue light, to far more questionable practices such as implanting microchips and hard drives, right? And God knows what else into our bodies. For those who are geared more toward these other examples, these darker examples, let me just go a little deeper down this rabbit hole for a second. Someone's asking, where am I reading this from? I'm reading this from a blog that I wrote that's on the Chalk blog website called Don't Be a Biohacker Because You're Not a Machine. I know this will come out reversed, but don't be a biohacker because you're not a machine. chalk.com/blog. I wrote this last year, actually. Okay, so where do we go from here? Transhumanism. That's where this is going, right? Biohacker is a term that comes from the same philosophy that is fueling the transhumanist movement, which I know that you guys are probably not giant fans of if you're on this channel, right? Transhumanism is the ultimate destination of the biohacking ethos as it relies upon the idea that we can dramatically improve our biology by fully merging with machines and becoming virtually indistinguishable from them. So those of us who are awake enough to doubt the narrative that merging with the synthetic is both inevitable and beneficial, something like transhumanism is extraordinarily unappealing, if not downright sickening. Personally, I find the idea literally nauseating. If you're one of the people who's a big fan of the notion that humans will soon enough merge with machines and machines will become so intelligent and autonomous that they may as well be people, then I'm particularly impressed if you're still reading this article or still watching this video, because you're probably disgusted with my arguments, as disgusted as I am with transhumanism. Statistically speaking, though, it's far more likely you're probably either on the fence or in the same camp as me on this issue. What camp would that be exactly? What camp am I in? What camp are most of you guys in? Well, we could say what team we're on, and eminent media theorist Douglas Rushkoff calls it Team Human. So I'd say we're on Team Human, right? So Rushkoff has this great video linked in the blog called Why Upgrading Humanity is a Transhumanist Myth. And he's got this great quote in here. The only ones out there who think they know what human consciousness is are computer engineers. If you talk to actual brain researchers and neuroscientists, they say we're nowhere even close. We don't even know for sure what goes on in a single square centimeter of soil. We're still trying to teach agriculture companies that the soil is alive, that it's not just dirt that you can put chemicals on. It's a living matrix. If we don't even know what a single centimeter of soil is, how do we know what the human brain is? We don't. We don't know what the source of consciousness is. We have no idea. We don't even know where we come from. We don't even know if there's a meaning to this universe or not. Yet we think we can make a simulation that's just as valid as this. Powerful words, right? So he goes on to talk about the origin of the phrase Team Human. Again, Douglas Rushkoff, amazing thinker. He is a media theorist and great work. He has a book also called Team Human. Okay. Here's Rushkoff's story of the origin of Team Human. I was on a panel with a famous transhumanist, and he was arguing that it's time that human beings come to accept that we will have to pass the torch of evolution to our digital successors. And that once computers have the singularity and they're really thinking and better than us, we should really only stick around as long as the computers need us. To keep the lights on and oil their little circuits or whatever we have to do. And then after that, fade into oblivion. And I said, hey, no, wait a minute. Human beings are still special. We're weird. We're quirky. We deserve a place in the digital future. And he said, oh, Rushkoff, you're just saying that because you're human, as if it's hubris to say that, right? Oh, I'm just defending my little team. And that's when I got the idea. All right, fine. I'm human. I'm on Team Human. So, if you're not going to be a biohacker, what should you be instead? Is there a term? I honestly don't have one. I don't know what you guys think. Admittedly, I don't have a perfect alternative nomenclature for biohacker. And don't get me wrong, I thought about it. I really did. Half-baked terms that are infinitely less catchy and less interesting swirled through my mind like bioharmonizer and biophile. Although I might consider applying those to myself under certain circumstances, I doubt they'll be catching on anytime soon. At the end of the day, though, what really matters isn't whether you use the term or not. It's whether you use it consciously. I have no desire to treat biohacking like it's evil or try to expunge it from the lexicon as if it were some sort of slur. We all enjoy using techniques to support our physiology and improve our quality of life. Humans have been doing this for millennia. Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, countless indigenous cultures have been systematically studying the body in their own ways, according to their own methods, which are often just as valid as those of modern science. The difference is that they had not yet created a landscape of the synthetic that allowed them to isolate themselves from nature and replace her with their own technology. These ancient cultures, were still immersed in her seasons, her soil, and her enchanting fractal geometries. This isn't to say, of course, that ancient people had it all figured out, or that humans have not evolved in endless ways in the last several millennia. It's not about worshiping the past. If there's anything I'd recommend you be instead of a biohacker, it would be this. Be a human who is in love with biology and all its curious creations. Be a humble student of life to the best of your ability. and always admit the limitations of your knowledge. Live in the reality of the mystery of existence. The problem with the scientific materialist and transhumanist perspectives is that technology has become their golden calf, their precision, quantified, predictable, deterministic substitute for the enigmatic, mystical, inscrutable, spiritual dimensions. Such a disconnection from the mystery can only result in calamity, as humility is thrown completely out the window. And finally, in this last section, somebody mentioned singularity. So let's talk about the singularity for a second, and then we'll finish up. This is what I call a new singularity. Just what are we doing to ourselves spiritually and bioenergetically with all this technology? If you're the kind of person who doesn't believe in chakras, meridians, or the notion that consciousness is anything more than an epiphenomenon of the brain, these questions are irrelevant. Whether the tech you develop will affect these things is of no consequence, because they're all just figments of the primitive imagination, according to that perspective. For those of us, however, who have access to states of consciousness that confirm the existence of these things, or at least the possibility of their existence, these questions are of extreme importance. Transhumanists speak of the singularity, the point at which machines will become more intelligent than humans, and thus we're forced to merge with them in order to remain relevant, achieving a kind of pseudo-immortality as we inevitably upload our consciousness into silicon. But if you believe in the idea of some kind of etheric self, whether you call it spirit, soul, or whatever else, you may, like me, find this idea preposterous for a number of reasons. Among them, that it relies on the fallacious assumption that intelligence is the most critical element in our survival and evolution, overshadowing things like wisdom, compassion, and creativity. I propose an alternative singularity. A singularity for Team Human. Let's call this the singularity of human techno-spiritual equivalence, and let's define it at the point at which humans have reached a critical mass of psychological, emotional, ethical, and spiritual maturity that enables us to responsibly create technology not only for the good of all of humanity, but also the good of all life on Earth and beyond. Unlike Kurzweil's singularity, which is predicted to happen in around 25 years, this one will probably take a bit longer, but I think we have a good shot at it, as people are waking up and old paradigms are falling apart at record speed. So in conclusion, hack away at anything and everything, your biology, your beliefs, your relationships, experiment, fool around, have fun. But remember, Gaia was here first, and we're nowhere even close to grokking her existence and her exquisite complexity. So stay humble and do your best to respect the mystery of life, because that's the real way forward. That's the attitude that will usher in the real singularity, the one we actually need. So that was one of my favorite blog articles that I've ever written. I really enjoyed it. Hope you guys did too. Again, long story short, we are immersed in technology, and I love technology. I'm not against it. I use it all the time, obviously. Using it right now to talk to you on this platform. I used it to read off of my iPad here. Like I said, I've got my massage gun here. All my gadgets, but we have become obsessed with technology. Humans have. It is absolutely ridiculous. And as a result of what happened last year with all of us being really, really isolated, we had to rely on technology even more than we ever did to connect to each other. And when you do that, the more you do that, and again, like I said, I'm using technology right now to communicate with you, but there are limitations to that, and face-to-face real human interaction, there is absolutely no replacement for that. If I could sit with you guys in person right now and say this, that would obviously be much better, right? So it's great that technology allows us to communicate with each other, but increasingly technology is also censored and filtered, and all sorts of weird things are going on. And the people doing that are the people who subscribe to this philosophy of scientific materialism, this idea that everyone's a machine. So once you understand this philosophy, this broken paradigm of everything being machines and us all being machines, you start to realize, wow, it's really, really pervasive. Really pervasive. People taking on all these metaphors, these machine metaphors, right? And sure, there's nothing wrong with using a machine metaphor, saying, I upgraded myself or something like that. It's fine. It's relatively harmless, but look at the bigger picture and the way that we have confused ourselves with machines on so many levels. And if you think about it, increasingly, there is a movement to try to predict human behavior, right, as if we were machines. And the more predictable we are, the better these algorithms will be able to predict how we behave, and we become more and more controllable, the same way that you would control any other machine inside of a larger system of machines. If anyone has ever seen Westworld on HBO, at first glance it might just seem like some dumb sex and violence, whatever kind of thing. I won't spoil it for you, but I will tell you, Westworld, the people who wrote that script for that show, they know what's going on right now, and they have their finger on the pulse. And if you can make it all the way through to the last season, through all 3 seasons, and finish the whole series, it is an incredible cautionary tale. It's actually really brilliantly written, and if you know how to decode it and see what it's actually talking about, there's actually a really important message in it, I believe. Perhaps not everybody can decode it that way, but if you can decode it that way, yeah, that series, highly recommended. So, that's I think that's it for today, actually. Yeah. Thanks so much, guys. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it. Last thing I will say is, I've been just using the phrase "stay human" a whole lot, because I did a video a while back on Instagram, called "How to Stay Human" on the same kind of topic, right? And obviously, if you're just tuning in right now, definitely rewatch it. It'll be on Instagram in just a second, and I'll be reposting this on YouTube. Also, make sure to check out our Chalk Nation YouTube channel. Just go to YouTube, type in Chalk or Chalk Nation. It'll pop right up. But I'll just say that, try to figure out how you can connect with something that hasn't been made by humans. So, yeah. And on that note, I'm probably going to go for a hike right now. So, thanks so much. Glad you guys tuned in. This was a lot of fun. And as always, stay human.